It's 6 o'clock, so we'll get underway with tonight's meeting of council. Nala Kadich Wajak Mort, Kayan Kadak Nijawalilat Budja, Wejinang Wajak Kadajan, Wenyiting Bula Yaya. We acknowledge the Wajak people as the traditional owners of the Greater Fremantle Walyalup area, and we recognise that their cultural and heritage beliefs are still important today. The meeting is being recorded and streamed live online. While all care is taken to maintain privacy, visitors in the public gallery and members of the public submitting a question may be captured in the recording. Attendance, apologies, leaves of absence. I believe Councillor Lang is running late and I think everyone else is here. Do we have any applications for leaves of absence? Do we have any disclosures of interest by members? We don't have responses to previous questions taken on notice, which brings us to public question time. For those of you who maybe haven't appeared at a council meeting before, you've got two options. If your item is on the agenda, you're welcome to speak before that item, and that sort of gives elected members the opportunity to ask you questions, particularly planning items where they might be of a technical nature. But if you prefer, you're also welcome to just speak in the public question time. So I can see Ian Kerr wants to speak on a couple of items, so I'll put that in the public question time. But after that, I'll ask if there are any other people who would prefer to speak in the public question time. So Ian, if you want to come up, and as Ian knows, but for everyone else, it's 3 minutes and you'll hear a little sound when that time is nearly up. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Mayor. The first item I want to speak on is 318 to 320 South Terrace. The recommendation for refusal here, I know that officers have limited discretion in respect of such things, but it does primarily depend on the issue of parking. Now, local planning scheme parking requirements are based on the US Institute of Transportation Engineers' observations of trip generation rates and the assumption that the site should be self-contained with adequate parking. Whilst this might be appropriate for standalone businesses in suburban locations, the number of bays required will be far too high for multi-use inner urban locations with shared parking and better access by walk, cycle and public transport. Now, as most of you will know, South Terrace in South Fremantle is a modern-day success story with an eclectic mix of businesses. But if the logic of this current report had been applied, virtually none of them would have been allowed. Moreover, no new businesses or expansion of existing ones would be allowed. This business has been operating in its current mode for several years with no evidence of the problems suggested in the report. So I urge Council to support Councillor Lang's alternative motion for approval. The second item is the Fremantle Oval Redevelopment Master Plan. And whilst the first two parts of the recommendation provide the opportunity for changes to the plan, the third, almost by definition, presumes that there will not be any such changes or that they will not be significant. Any negotiations would, of necessity, be based on the current draft plan, and should there be substantial changes to it, any funding or other agreements could be in jeopardy. This might not be a concern, except that there is no consensus on the recommended large-scale development, particularly the residential component. Apart from the intrusion into the Fremantle Prison World Heritage Precinct, the inclusion of a large amount of residential development is clearly in conflict with the desire to make the Oval, and I quote, a vibrant event or match day destination. I know from experience on Vincent Council when Perth Oval was redeveloped for A-League soccer that also hosted major music and other events that such conflicts can be very difficult to manage. I urge Council to support the first two parts of the recommendation, completing the community engagement, but to defer the third until the master plan has been agreed with community support. In the absence of that, please support Councillor Archibald's amendment, which at least makes it clear that the process is nowhere near complete. Thank you.
Thank you. So the remainder of the people, as I understand, in the public gallery are here the specific items. So we will be working through the agenda in order, and I think everyone's here for items 1 or 2. But if anyone does wish to sort of have their 3 minutes now, you're welcome to come up and do that now if you prefer. Nope. Okay, so we will go through the rest of the preliminaries and then we'll come to those items 1 and 2. Can I get someone, sorry, we've got no petitions or deputations. So can I ask that someone move to confirm the minutes from the last meeting? Councillor Van Dawson, seconded by Councillor Moughlin. All those in favour? And that's unanimous. Elected member communication. Councillor Graham, I believe you wanted to say something?
Thanks, Madam Mayor. Just a couple of quick things. I've represented the city at 2 events in the last fortnight since the previous meeting. One was the Fremantle City Soccer Club, which was also attended by yourself, Madam Mayor, and Councillors Kamada and Moughlin. I know I rabbit on about volunteers, but the Fremantle City Soccer Club this year introduced a new award, which was the Volunteer of the Year Award, and it went to a lady, Lolita Elverd. Now, apart from being the general dog's body around the club and doing everything else, she is in charge of registering all the teams. There are 91 soccer teams at the Fremantle City Soccer Club, and she volunteers her time to keep the registrations up to date, which means keeping details of every player. So can you imagine the massive task that is? So it was fantastic to see Lolita get this award. She was very grateful, a very humble lady. So I'd just like to mention her and, extend our appreciation for what she does to our Fremantle City Soccer Club. I also attended the Fremantle Sailing Club opening day on behalf of the Mayor because she couldn't attend. The Commodore there spoke highly of the volunteers that they have. They have hundreds of volunteers there, from the board down to flag officers and everything in between. He did list it, and there was about 20 things in between. So you can imagine how much work that goes into running a sailing club of that size with 3,300 members. So I like to keep the idea of volunteers going because the more volunteers we have in the community makes for stronger communities. Also, the Vice Commodore at the Sailing Club thanked the council for the work on the drainage that is going on or will be going on down there. So bit of a gong, so I was pretty pleased with that as well. Anyway, that's it.
Thank you, Councillor Graham. Did we have any other elected member communication? All right, so that goes to reports and recommendations from officers. So C24101, South Terrace, number 318 to 320. Do I have someone to move the officers or alternative motion? Oh, thank you. Yes, we have a couple of speakers on this item. No, we've had one, and we have one more, which is Serge Noto. So if you want to come up, Serge. Thank you.
Thank you, Mayor. I actually had a spiel written up before I saw Councillor Lang's proposed alternative motion, so I'll just scrap that spiel. Firstly, I just want to say thank you to all the officers who helped me through this process. Very informative, and they actually come out to see me, so I'm actually appreciative of all that. Obviously new to the hospitality industry and a lot of the regulations, so that was very appreciative. Also like to thank the councillors for the proposed alternative motion, and hopefully that all the councillors can follow in that approval. And finally, it's just a quick one. Finally, this year is actually 50 years since my parents purchased that premises, and from there being a deli to a cafe and another cafe. It wasn't my first port of call because I'm an accountant by profession, and to my wife's dismay, I do work 7 days a week. So hopefully I can continue to service the South Freo community like we have done for 50 years. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillors, did we have any questions for Serge? Nope. Thank you. All right. So if I can get someone to move one of the recommendations that are on the table, Councillor Lorber.
Yeah, can I move Councillor Lang's alternate recommendation, but incorporate Andrew Sullivan's proposed amendment as a minor amendment to that, please?
You can. Do we have a seconder for that? Councillor Sullivan? Yeah. All right, over to you.
Great. I mean, this is established business in South Fearless doing great work down there, in my opinion. So I'll just leave it at that. And if there's any comments, I'll save that for the closing. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Sullivan?
Thanks. Yeah, I'm having been a councillor in South Ward and now Coastal Ward for a very long time. These applications are always interesting and provide a lot of different feedback in the community. Had this been a different type of land use, or had this been a new proposal for a large restaurant in South Fremantle, that could potentially also, have a lot of liquor service and the like, we would have typically got huge backlash from the community about, oh my God, not another booze barn, not another big venue, not another car park generating proposal that is just going to destroy the neighbourhood. Now, as the speakers have identified, South Fremantle has become an unbelievably special place. And it's become that because of the sorts of activities that the Nottos have brought to us over 50 years, of which I've enjoyed all of the different services that they've provided over most of that period of time, not quite the 50, perhaps about 40. And the reality is that these are the sorts of things that do make that area great. So it has been the case in the past that we have relaxed car parking requirements in South Fremantle particularly, and elsewhere, where they are the sorts of land uses that we know genuinely serve the local community primarily, but also the broader community that are now coming to enjoy South Beach and South Fremantle more generally. And while parking is an absolute pain in the derriere for local residents, including myself, that is the price that we pay, I believe, in a community to have such an amazing facility of the two different major nodes in South Fremantle that end up making our lifestyles so enjoyable. And that is the balancing act that we constantly have to fight with. And so I'm glad that this alternative recommendation has been brought forward. And yet, at the same time, I do acknowledge the concern in the community about parking and the like. So that balancing act, I guess I wanted to say that because, we do get heavily criticised sometimes when we support these types of activities. And other times when people can see what's on offer, which they can see what's on offer now because it's already been on offer for a very, very, very long time. Not necessarily this iteration, but certainly the iterations beforehand. We get overwhelming requests of support from the community to say, what the hell are you thinking for suggesting it should be refused? So with that balancing act and that contradiction in mind, I do say that I absolutely support the alternative recommendation. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillors? Any further speakers? All right, if we want to go to Councillor Lawver to close. All right, I'll put that one to a vote. All those in favour? And that appears to be unanimous. Thank you. So that's a decision tonight. That's going to bring us to Atfield Street, the second item, C24102. I note that Councillor Lang has joined us. All right, do we have a mover for the officer's recommendation on this one? Yep. Councillor Lawver, and I think I saw Councillor Kamada seconding it. Thank you. Over to you.
Like the last one, supporting the officer's recommendation on this.
I've forgotten again. You
speakers.
didn't pull me up
Yeah.
this time, did you?
No,
So-
sorry.
It's been a very long day, I'll just give you that. We're going to go to the speakers and, sorry? Yep. I thought I was getting told off for standing order violations. Yes, withdraw it. Thank you. That's right. We'll come back to it later. We actually, it's all good. It's all good. So the first speaker we have is Anthea Fursland. So I'll go to Anthea.
Thank you, Mayor. Good evening, councillors. Thank you for this opportunity. I'm Anthea Fursland. Nigel Moffat and I own and live at 104 Atfield Street on the south side of 102. The plans for a rear extension at 102 eliminate sun from our rear outside living area we use throughout the year, destroy its amenity, and severely affect the way we live. At issue is the applicant's claim the ground levels of the two sites are the same, which they are not. And despite council requests to verify this, they have not done so. The council meeting of September 11th invited the applicant to, point 1, consider submitting an amended proposal to increase the southern upper floor setback to reduce the impact of overshadowing on the neighbours' outdoor living and major openings. They have partially addressed this, but the design principles of solar access are still being ignored. The overshadowing in the latest proposal affects 100% of our outdoor living area. Point 2, they were asked to provide additional detail regarding neighbouring site levels and the overshadowing calculation. They have not done this. This means the planning department continues to recommend approval of a planning application that ignores a council directive. This makes no sense. A planning department is responsible for ensuring information provided by applicants is correct. The information before you is still wrong. We commissioned a heritage architect report that was sent to the planning department on July 31st and to councillors yesterday, showing the garden level of 104 is 150 millimetres lower than 102, and our patio level is 520 to 600 mil lower than 102. We only received the latest plans 6 days ago when we learned the applicants had still not accounted for the differing ground levels as requested by you. The applicants claim the ground levels of 102 and 104 are equal when they are not. To address this, we have engaged a licensed surveyor to determine these levels urgently, but the first day they can do this is Friday. Taking into account the differing levels, the overshadowing is 16.7 square metres more than the current plan estimates and 11.2 square metres more than allowed under the R codes. In summary, the owners of 102 have not resolved the overshadowing issue. They have ignored the council request to consider the different levels of the two properties. Therefore, our request tonight is this application not be approved, since any revised calculations and information provided do not comply with our codes and are based on incorrect information. Thank you.
Thank you, Anthea. Do we, councillors, have you got any questions for Anthea? I think the next person speaking maybe also able to answer questions, and I will get an officer comment before we go into the debate regarding the overshadowing. All right, Michael Clare, you're the next speaker.
Thanks. Thank you very much. Tonight will be short and sweet from me. Obviously, I was here a month ago, and we went through, what we did to get to where we were. So since last meeting, we took on board council's comments. We appreciated council's comments, and we revised the plans. We really addressed the concerns about the southern upper floor setback. We increased the setback from 1.3 to 1.5, and as a result, that setback is now meets the deemed to comply requirements of the R codes. So in terms of the setback requirements, that is addressed. We engaged a licensed surveyor to review the cadastral boundaries because that was raised as a concern. The tree in question is within our boundary. The surveyor reviewed the site levels where possible without obviously having the ability to enter the neighbouring site, and at grade on the boundary, the neighbouring property, the surveyor's comments and was in the feedback we were given was adjoining the property from his review is at grade, and obviously he didn't enter the property, so he can't speak to the rest of the site. We also obviously throughout the process, we ensured the height is compliant, the open space is compliant, the provision of landscaping is compliant, outdoor living area requirements is compliant, visual privacy is also compliant, and there is a condition of requiring any overlooking to be screened, so that sort of satisfies that concern. So in terms of the development, it's clearly not an overdevelopment. We've done everything we can to reduce impacts to the neighbours, but we still do have the ability to develop. Our clients do have the ability to develop their site, and as it stands, it's a relatively compliant development with the R code. So, and that's a good judge of impacts to amenity. So, we welcome a favourable outcome tonight, and thanks to the city for everything to get to this point.
Thank you. Questions? Councillor Sullivan?
Thanks. I'm assuming that both either yourselves working for the applicant and/or the surveyor have actually looked over the fence and identified that, yes, immediately on the other side of the fence, the levels are relatively similar, maybe this much different, but that immediately another metre, half a metre, less than a metre within the neighbouring property, the levels drop to the level of the house. Can you explain to me whether you believe that the overshadowing needs to be relative to the levels that are there, or just assuming that the level of the property is at the same level as it is at the boundary? So what's your understanding of the codes? Because it seems to me that it needs to comply with the ground levels that are there on the other side.
Yeah, so as you would be aware, the ARCOs do consider the neighbouring properties' site levels, and we consider the neighbouring properties' site levels, and in our opinion, we meet the deemed to comply requirements. This is based off the plans that we've prepared and the surveying drawings that we've prepared. To this point, the neighbouring property hasn't provided any official site levels. So from what we can review within our ability, it's a deemed to comply overshadowing proposed development. So, there is an area of excavated ground level on the neighbouring property where the patio exists, and our designer did the best that he could within his ability. He has no ability to enter the neighbouring properties. The neighbouring property to review the site levels, and so he assessed it and provided plans as best he could based on the information that's provided. And as far as we're concerned, we've had a surveyor survey our site and survey what he can, and that's the information that we have.
Thank you. All right. I've got two remaining speakers on this one, Steve Quill and Nicole Quill. Whatever order.
Thank you, Mayor, and thank you, councillors, for allowing me to speak tonight. I'm sure it's not my preferred option. As most of you are now aware, we began dialogue with the City in June last year to ensure we were across all the heritage and planning matters ahead of a formal DA. This is essentially how we landed at the plans that we've got today and are quite different to where we started. Along the way, we've made numerous changes, compromises and amendments to the plans. Several changes have resulted from submissions which we've taken on board. Some submissions have included comments discrediting our plans, our surveys and the professionals we've engaged. Often no evidence has been provided supporting these claims. However, the onus is always on us to disprove them. Irrespective, we've amended plans in the interest of a compromise and moving forward with the project. We came aware during the last council meeting that an alternative motion had been proposed prior, rejecting our plans and raising several items that had been previously addressed. As we were unaware of this motion, we were unable to address these items directly at the last meeting. We found it strange that plans would be rejected without at least hearing our presentations or discussions, albeit we're naive to the process. Also at the last meeting, it was claimed the City may have erred in the heritage advice we were given and that we should move the upper storey to the north and that this could be mediated very quickly. In good faith, following the meeting, we liaised with the city, who advised they didn't necessarily agree with this interpretation, and either way, a significant change would require a new DA, a new heritage assessment and advertising, with no guarantees. With this not an option, we began addressing the additional matters raised at the last meeting, despite all of them being addressed previously. We obtained a second survey to confirm the tree was on our property, and this was subsequently confirmed by a survey by the affected neighbour. Our overshadowing was previously compliant. We had new plans drawn to reduce the setback further. Small changes still require big effort, and unfortunately we got some great people involved who dropped everything and turned it around within a week. The subject of base levels was first raised in June this year, with no evidence to support that there was any differences. We addressed this at the time to the city's satisfaction. Our block's been surveyed several times, and as Michael said, the survey has indicated that in his opinion, there's not any material discrepancy between the natural base levels of the properties. The city has agreed with this. We've still seen no evidence provided to dispute this. In summary, we're not really sure what more we have to do. We're 15 months down. We continue to have the full support of the heritage team and the administration, yet we're still being portrayed as selfish developers rather than residents trying to restore a home with a modest addition. I understand there's emotion involved, and I appreciate people don't like change and there'll be disputes. I'm sure there'll be further comments discrediting our project and our professionals and advice with little proof or evidence, which muddies the waters. All we'll ask is for you guys to look at what's happened to date, what's happened at the last meeting, and decide whether you think we've complied. I'm not sure we've got too much more to give. Thank you.
Thank you, Steve. And I think I just note that there's no intention to discredit anyone. The reason things come to us at council is because agreement hasn't been able to be reached often between neighbours, and that's where very often elected members get involved. And you know, certainly we will interrogate, as is our role, to understand better every aspect that's been raised. Nicole Quill, did you wish to speak?
Good evening, Madam Mayor and council members. Please let me start by apologising if I end up reading my thoughts with you tonight, as I get nervous addressing people in a public forum such as this. However, I feel I owe it to my family and to our home to address you all tonight. As you were made aware from our last ordinary council meeting, there's much history with our DA, and I'm hopeful that you have been briefed and all your questions satisfied by the planning team at the City of Fremantle. I stand here tonight not only as a ratepayer, but simply a woman who fell in love with a quirky heritage house in a lovely little street in a community she wants to embrace and call home to her and her family. As you're aware, our journey to date has been long and exhausting, very stressful and expensive. We have had countless sleepless nights worrying about what the restoration and the extensions would look like, and of course, our neighbours' needs. I appreciate no one likes change and covets their property, which is no different to ourselves. And I'm sure everyone concerned has gone through their own obstacles and hurdles throughout this process. However, not once have we ignored a recommendation and concerns from Heritage, Council or our neighbours. In fact, quite the opposite. We have listed, addressed and made amendments that we hoped would have appeased all. During this time, we have read the objections and heard the comments, and some which frankly have been cruel and certainly not the community I was led to believe South Fremantle was known for, which has been probably the biggest surprise to me. We believe we have submitted our plans within the guidelines and our codes. However, I'm unsure why our configuration, how many bedrooms or internal heights of our ceilings have to do with the neighbouring properties, and quite frankly, it feels a little discriminate. I would like to thank the Planning Committee for their support and guidance throughout this DA process. However, dealing with the uncertainty, lengthy timelines and unkind words we have received has made this experience very distressing and one that I never expected to encounter. In the future, I hope none of our neighbours or future residents of the community are subjected to this. I thank you again for your time this evening, and we urge you to support the City's recommendation and approve our DA, as we're not sure what more we need to do. Thank you.
Thank you. All right, so we'll go back to the motion as moved by Councillor Lorber and seconded by Councillor Kamada. I'm just going to ask the officers to comment on the survey issue, if that's all right, and then if you've got another question, maybe follow on. So, Chloe?
Through the chair, it is correct. We don't have licensed surveyor plans for the adjoining property. Based on the information we do have, though, we are satisfied that what information has been provided on the plans is accurate in terms of the impact. If there is doubt in terms of that overshadowing calculation, it doesn't mean that council cannot approve this proposal. They simply need to apply the design principles, and in applying those, looking at how that shadow does impact the neighbouring property. The applicant has looked to address things from the last meeting and has pulled back the eaves and the setback of that upper floor.
Thank you. Councillor Lorber, did you have further questions?
Yeah, I do. And it just pertains to those separate levels because we deferred this last time to get more information, and that information wasn't in the agenda stuff, so I assumed it just hadn't come through. But being here tonight, the applicant's town planner or developer did acknowledge that there is a lower level on that other site. So this approval relies a lot on the deemed to comply, which are things that we obviously can't, they're deemed to comply. But in the situation where the setback is deemed to comply, but that setback may be causing an overshadowing that may not be deemed to comply if the levels were there, I guess what happens in that situation if they're deemed to comply on their setback, but that actually causes an issue elsewhere?
Through the chair, there is often times with additions to dwellings or new dwellings where it is clear that there is an impact. Unfortunately, the R codes aren't a perfect document, and sometimes when things are deemed to comply, it might be that very small element that's being overshadowed is the only outdoor living area or the only living room window, but it meets that arbitrary line. So based on our assessment, the overshadowing and the lot boundary setbacks are deemed to comply. We do acknowledge that there is going to be an impact, but unfortunately, in our view, it does comply in those circumstances.
Thank you. Councillor Lorber, did you have a question, Councillor Williams-Moore? Yep.
A question for Chloe. The R codes refer in considering overshadowing refer to a natural ground level. If a site has been excavated, is that considered the natural ground level? What is considered the natural ground level, I guess?
The natural ground level is the approved level at the time of development, so it's not the historic topography of the site. It is effectively what is there today. When you look at this site, the southern site is sort of up the hill, but there is the cut down, so there's a bit of a balancing act there. But yeah, it is based on the levels that are there right now.
Thank you. Another question?
Question regarding the making of an application and the responsibility for the accuracy of it. Does that responsibility lie with the applicant, with the neighbours identifying if it's wrong, or with the officers doing the assessment?
It is predominantly with the applicant, where they need to provide us with accurate information, but the decision maker does need to be confident that that information is correct.
Thank you.
So a second question was regarding the suggestion that was made by the applicants that if they were to have changed the proposal to one of the closer to one of the proposals that I believe they had in the original time, that they would have to make a brand new application and go through the entire process again. Was that the advice of the officers, or was the advice more along the lines of it would be treated as a modification because of the way the council dealt with it in the meeting?
Through the chair, it's certainly not the advice I've provided. I can't speak for other conversations that have occurred. Amendments to plans can be dealt with through the existing application. If it is a significantly different proposal, then yes, it might be appropriate for a new DA. We would, given it is a heritage listed property, if there are changes that do impact that heritage streetscape and the dwelling, we would, of course, still need updated heritage advice. And if the change brings in a new planning discretion, we would need to re-advertise it, but it could be dealt with as part of that same DA.
All right. Okay, so we've got the officer's recommendation is the only recommendation on the table. It's been moved by Councillor Lorver and seconded by Councillor Kamada. Does anyone wish to speak to the item? Councillor Archibald?
I just would like to ask, I've just been looking through to get a comparison on the overshadowing diagram between the first application that came to us and the second. I can't find, the only plan I found was dated August. Do you know how much difference the moving of the ridge line to the north made in terms of the overshadowing on the property to the south?
Through the chair, I don't have the exact figure, but it is relatively minor. The eave has basically been brought in by about 500 millimetres, so it's probably a couple of square metres.
Yes, I mean, we've had something similar to this come through. I'll just speak, but I'm not too sure where I'm going to land yet. I'll just speak about the application. We had a similar application in Swanbourne Street, which also has narrow old lots and people extending old single cottages and building quite substantial rear developments, which is fine. You know, I mean, it happens all over Fremantle. But again, it was the same east-west alignment of the property, and so the impact is always difficult to manage in terms of open space that is available to the houses and the overshadowing that comes as a result of the development. And in both of these, the case at Swanbourne Street and this one in particular, was that the neighbour's outdoor space, which is, you know, pretty precious space because the sites are not big. They're small lots, and often the only area that they've got with the outdoor space is the bit that they're already using. Is the area that gets compromised. In the case of the Swanbourne Street proposal, the proponent did resolve to a fairly reasonable extent the overshadowing, and that's why I was keen to see how much difference this one had made. So I kind of feel a little bit frustrated that this hasn't, I understand that it complies with, it reaches the deemed comply part perhaps, but it is based on a discretion of council to achieve the approval, as I understand it. So I just feel a bit disappointed that it hasn't managed to take account of that one particular aspect where the outdoor space, which is pretty precious to anyone who lives in these houses, is the bit that's mostly compromised. And so there's not much room for the people on the south side to move because, you know, the north boundary has got the impact of the two-storey component, and they've got really nowhere else to go on their lot because there's long, narrow lots, and there's not much else that they can do. So I just wanted to make that comment that it's just very frustrating that a little bit more attention can't be paid in these sorts of cases, although I do understand that each applicant is trying to get the best that they can out of their own property. Thank you.
Councillor Sullivan, then Councillor Lorver.
Thank you. This is a challenging one for all of us. First of all, I want to just emphasise that these are not small lots by South Fremantle standards. They're not narrow lots by South Fremantle standards. Both the applicant's lot and particularly the neighbour to the south with the overshadowing impacts. So let's get that clear right off the start point. The comments that I made at the last council meeting, I came into that meeting quite concerned that the applicant didn't appear to have made much effort to really take into account the neighbour's situation both to the east and to the south. And I had that in my head because it is a relatively large block, and it did seem to me quite clearly that approaches could have been made to redevelop without having the level of impact on amenity to their neighbours. And I just, for the life of me, couldn't understand why they hadn't done that. That's how I came into the meeting. When I heard the speakers identify that they were effectively told that they would need to put the additions into that corner on heritage grounds from the heritage advice, I was stunned. I was shocked. I can't remember the word that I used, but I actually had to, on the run, completely rethink what I thought about this application. And I made the very clear observation that I had already worked through in my head as to why hadn't it been proposed, the upper story addition, to be more towards the north when it was quite capable and quite easy to do so. So I was appreciative of the deferral, and I tried to emphasise that I felt that there would be strong council support, not necessarily city support, because the officers had already given their determination, but strong council support to make significant changes to this proposal, and that if they presented significant changes to this proposal back to council, without speaking absolutely for the rest of the council, I felt, in my opinion, reading the room, that there would be support for that, and that is the emphasis that I put on my my comments last time, and it was also the emphasis that I gave to the planner who rang me a few days later to talk about what the applicants were subsequently proposing. That doesn't mean that I should take a view that if something is deemed to comply, I should be obstinate or pig-headed and refuse it. But I'm not yet convinced that this application is deemed to comply. I'm not yet convinced that the overshadowing is within the requirements that are required by the scheme. And as the manager has said, if we were in that situation, we would then, so if we took it at face value that it is over the overshadowing requirement, we would still go through a normal process of saying, okay, what's the amenity impact of that? Where does that overshadowing fall? Does it fall over someone's garage or their front yard or their over their roof or the like? Or does it, and is the shadow in a location where even if it had been a single-story building, the shadow would still have effectively the same impact? Or is it a shadow that actually significantly impacts on somebody's external amenity, whether it be their outdoor living areas or their veggie gardens or their swimming pool or the like? That is the normal process that we would go through. And I think if you took the view that without adequate and unequivocal information that says that the levels that are indicated in the overshadowing diagrams can be relied upon, and that you therefore assume that the overshadowing is probably over, then I think we are entitled to make decisions of either approval if we think it's acceptable, if we think that the amenity impact is still okay, or refusal based on the amenity. For me, I very much, based on where I was before and based on where I think this has got to in terms of a willingness to, one, provide the accurate information that we asked for, and two, to give consideration to significant and easily achieved amendments, then I'm simply going to fall on the side of the refusal. It's not necessarily a position I would normally take. It's the process that has delivered me into this position. I would also say, and I said it last time, I don't know if I did actually say it last time, in the public meeting, but I did make the observation to other elected members, probably after the meeting, that these two wide lots to their north is the beginning of the narrow lots. So these two lots are basically two narrow lots joined together. So each of them is like a double lot compared to the lots to the north. And if the owner of the property immediately to the north was to propose exactly the same addition to their back garden, then they would overshadow 100% of the applicant's courtyard, and there wouldn't be anything that anybody could do about it. Is that the right outcome? It's what the R codes basically say can happen. And that is unfortunately the imperfection of the R codes. And in those situations, they could, could even be a well within compliance scheme that completely ruins the outdoor living area of someone. And we have to simply suck that up because that's the R codes as they are. But where the options exist to achieve a different outcome and they're easily available, then I, as a decision maker, am going to fall on the side of, unless it's 100%, and unless you've ticked the boxes, and unless you've actually taken a real attempt at the opportunity that was provided in the deferral to get both a great outcome for yourself as an applicant and a great outcome for the neighbours and the community that you so desire to live in, and I totally understand why you do desire to live here, then the reality is, for me, I have to say no on this occasion.
Right, Councillor Lorver, you haven't spoken yet, so over to you. You're not closing, is what I'm saying. No, he asked a question.
I didn't open my comments, but I'll wait until the very end.
Okay.
Can I just make a flag a procedural thing that I'll just, for procedural, I like to flag a potential another deferral, although I'm really hesitant to do that, but I'll explain my reasoning for flagging that when I close.
Okay. If there's a procedural motion, it may need to happen before closing, to be clear. Okay. Yep, anyone can move that, that's correct. Councillor Lang.
Thank you. That's a question, actually. With the survey data, the neighbours say they've scheduled a surveyor for Friday. That information was passed to the officers. What happens with that information? Talk me through that process. I'm not sure what happens. Do they give the data to you and then perhaps we review the application, and if the levels next door are lower by whatever amount, could that change the recommendation you put forward to us?
Through the chair, look, potentially we would need to have a look at the information that it was based on. But as I pointed out earlier, we would still undertake a design principle assessment. And when we look at the shadow and where it is falling, we think on balance that it is still supportable based on that design principle assessment. So it may be that there is still a recommendation for approval from officers.
Thank you. My comments, I would like to make a totally informed decision on this one, given it is so line ball. I don't want to refuse the new home that is proposed, and I don't want to put my hand up and vote for something that I don't have 100% information on. If the neighbour has scheduled a surveyor, I would support that to proceed. And if someone here was going to move a deferral, I would support that also, just so we can be totally informed on what the levels may be next door.
All right, councillors. Has Councillor Archibald spoken or questioned? You've spoken, so unless it's a question. There's a few councillors who haven't spoken. I don't know if you want to.
Can I move a deferral? Or is that speaking second.
Well, I'm just testing if there's any other councillors who wanted to maybe put their views on the table, because a
That was
procedural
the-
motion would end debate. Councillor Van Dawson?
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'll just try and keep my comments brief. This one is really challenging, and I'm very sympathetic to the neighbours and appreciate you being here to present, and but also very sympathetic to the applicants. I know the process you've been through, and I think I don't know how you win, because if they had have proposed a design such as Councillor Sullivan suggested, by moving the majority of the second-storey addition further away from the southern boundary, they wouldn't have had support from their heritage officers. And I know, coming through a planning application, the heritage comments are given significant weight. And often, when an application is not supported by heritage officers, it will not be supported by the planning officers either. So I don't know what more they could have done, and I do appreciate the amendments that you've made to reduce the impact. And yeah, I do understand we don't agree that we don't have all the information in terms of your accurate site levels, but I also feel I understand the difference is not significant, and about 150 mil you said. Okay.
We can't engage with debate with the audience.
Sorry. So yes, I understand that we don't have accurate site levels for the neighbour, but yeah, I'm not convinced that with that information, it may result in a minor. So at the moment, we're deemed to comply on overshadowing, and it might result in a minor discretion, or like a variation that would require our discretionary decision making. And I think when you look at the context of these developments in these areas, and applicants working on the advice of our officers for 15 months, and they've come this far, I just don't think it's fair and reasonable to not support this application. And in the context of this area where, like Andrew said, if the neighbour to the north of them develops similarly, it's going to take away all their, or it will overshadow their courtyard. It does seem to be the nature of development in this area that there is an impact on the neighbours, and I am really sympathetic because I've experienced it in my home as well. But yeah, with all the information that I have, I'm happy to support the officer's recommendation, but similarly I'd prefer to see a deferral than a refusal for sure. So if that's put forward, I'll make a decision then. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Moughlin?
Thank you. And yeah, I'm most probably in a similar position to Councillor Van Dawson in regards to this, and it, always very difficult to assess this when there are two, compelling cases on both sides. And we have heard officers speak about the data and information that we do have available, and that to their understanding, that is accurate and correct information. And for myself as an elected member, that's what I have to rely on, is that information that officers are assessing. And to get to a point as an applicant 15 months down the track and having made significant amendments and changes to designs over time, coming to council, having it deferred, and then coming back again, and we're not yet in a position, it seems that council isn't yet in a position to make a decision. It doesn't necessarily feel right that we're either going to make a call one way or another. And for me, I'm happy, not happy, but I'm willing to support the officer's recommendation for this.
Thank you, Councillor Moughlin. Councillor Williamson-Wong?
Thank you. Look, I think I'm echoing Councillor Moughlin and Councillor Van Dawson, so thank you for speaking before me. I am very sympathetic to the fact that it's going to have a large impact, and similarly to Councillor Van Dawson, have had it happen. But I guess, to me, when we look at what's before us tonight, we're bound by the R codes, and the discretions open to us tonight are visual privacy, the wall height and length, or the setback. And if there was a deferral, I see this item coming back to us with the discretion on overshadowing. And I think, to echo Councillor Moughlin, are we willing to make a decision in 2 weeks? I think it's been a long process for the applicants to get to this point, and I guess I don't know whether a deferral for another 2 weeks is going to deliver the outcome we want, or if we'll be having the same discussion in 2 weeks, just with a different discretion available to us. So at this point, I would be willing to support the officer's recommendation.
That was very articulately put, so to save time, I'll say that I also take that position. Councillor Kamada?
Yes, thank you. Yeah, I'll be brief and I'll continue along that theme. My notes echo what my fellow councillors, some of the comments that have been made, and I appreciate those. I appreciate both parties coming in, and I think we have all struggled with this, a great deal, and swayed from one side to the other at times. But I think the applicants have done everything they've been asked over a long period of time, and it appears that whichever way they go, they're going to be held up. And this is probably in a really difficult situation. This is probably, I don't think the outcome could probably be any better. So I'll be prepared to support the officer's recommendation.
All right, thank you, Councillor Kamada. Councillor Thompson?
Oh, yeah. Look, there's nothing I've heard tonight that would make me not vote for the officer's recommendation, and also there's nothing that I've heard tonight that would make me support a deferral, so I'll be voting for the officer's recommendation.
All right, councillors. A couple of options, I suppose, on the table. I can put the officer's recommendation to a vote. Councillor Lorver can close. Someone can move a deferral. Those are your options. All right, so you're going to close the debate then?
There won't be a deferral being considered. I came into this much like everyone here, thinking the information we had, and I've looked it over, and we deferred this once already, hoping to get more information, and it wasn't entirely provided. And I guess I had also, like Councillor Sullivan, had hoped for a more substantive change to the proposal tonight, but what was before us is what's before us. I'm not 100% confident that the overshadowing information that we have is 100% accurate. And I guess for me, if I have to weigh up us potentially giving a discretion against a heritage assessment, which, the streetscape heritage, or discretion against the amenity impact on a neighbor, I would be much more likely to be favorable to look at a potential heritage discretion, because the neighbors are going to be living there, for a long time, and people are going to move in and out, and the streetscape will be the streetscape. Without knowing exactly what that proposal is, I also am not 100% confident that that was the advice from the officers, that heritage thing would be a deal breaker. So I would have liked to have seen that and kind of tested that and had that come through. So I didn't move this thinking that I would be going for refusing this officer's recommendation, and it has been a great debate, and I appreciate everyone's comments. But I think that's where I'm going to land on this, just because that's now the only option before us is to approve or reject. I wish there was another way that we could have gone forward, but I guess we're here where we're at. So that's it.
Thank you. All right, I'll put that to a vote. All those in favour of the officer's recommendation, please leave your hand up. Councillors Thompson, Councillor Van Dawson, Councillor Williamson Wong, myself, Councillor Kamada, Councillor Mofflin, Councillor Graham, and against Councillors Sullivan, Lang, Lorver and Archibald. So that's carried. So that's an approval tonight for the proposal. Okie doke. Got a couple of other planning reports before we come to the Fremantle Oval. We'll get someone to move the planning information report. I'll move the planning information report. Councillor Mofflin can second it. I just wondered if there were any updates on any of the items in the planning information report that officers might like to give.
Through the chair, probably the only update is for the Essex Street item, which was deferred by DAP for a period of 120 days, and it's with the applicant to review the proposal in relation to waste and the bulk and scale of the addition. So we're waiting to hear what those changes will be.
Thank you. Councillors, anything else on the information report? No? All right, I'll put that to a vote. All those in favour? And the next item is the local planning policy update, which is primarily about changing words, as I understand it. So I have someone to move that one. Councillor Sullivan, seconded by Councillor Graham. Do we have any speakers on that one? Okay, I'll put that to a vote. All those in favour? And that's unanimous. Thank you. All right, that brings us to the strategic and general reports. So we'll go to the Fremantle Oval Redevelopment Master Plan. Do I have a mover for that one? A bunch of people who've been on a working group for a long time here. Councillor Kamada and Councillor Sullivan seconding that one. All right, did you want to open debate on that one, Councillor Kamada? Sure. All right. Councillors, do we want to speak more generally on this? Yep,
I was just gonna can I just move my amendment, please?
Yep, sure.
Just get that over with.
Seconder for Councillor Lawver's amendment, which is on the screen now. Yep, Councillor Sullivan. Any discussion?
It's pretty clear. I'll just if there's comments, I'll just address it in closing on the amendment. Otherwise, it's pretty clear, I think.
All right. Councillors, any comments on the amendment? No, I'll put it to a vote then. All those in favour? And that's unanimous, so that's now included. We could stay on amendments for a while if you wanted to, Councillor Archibald.
Yep, thank you. I'd like to move my amendment. Is there a second to that, and then I can speak to it?
Yep, seconded by Councillor Sullivan.
Okay, thank you. I just want to make just a very brief comment that I did raise the issue of, how we determine the sort of building envelope for any future buildings, because at this stage there is no kind of specific building envelope or scale or anything like that. It's purely indicative. So the Director of Planning came back to me with the list, which would be the process that we would have to go through as a council, and I felt that it was worth the community having that list so that they could see how any building proposals would have to be dealt with by the council, so that there would be opportunity for input and serious assessment. In saying that too, I'm really keen to make sure that because we have the Prism, which is a World Heritage listed site, the Oval is certainly a very significant heritage site, that sight lines, proportion, how things relate, how those sites relate to each other is going to be extremely important into the future. So that's why I felt that it was very important that the community understood how any future development for this site would have to be managed. And hopefully with that, we will end up with something that is supported and able to proceed. Thank you. So hopefully people will support it.
Thank you. Councillor Kamada, you've on the amendment?
Yeah, I'd like to speak to the amendment and possibly cover everything I've had to say in one go, and if I've got additional comments, I can always add them. The historical importance of Fremantle Oval is undeniable, and however, Fremantle Oval is tired and in need of serious attention to bring it into the modern age. It's been, a real learning experience for me to be on the working group, and a lot of work has gone into this. But the critical aspect that we need to consider is getting the balance right. I won't go into details of what's in the report because the report is very comprehensive and covers it really well. We can learn lessons from recent developments at East Fremantle Oval and Claremont. It's been highlighted so many times we don't want to end up with a Claremont, and it's been brought up. Councillor Sullivan will confirm that it's been a topic of consideration in the working group, that we don't want to end up with a result along those lines, and it's brought up in the community on many occasions. But unlike East Fremantle Oval and Claremont are unlike Fremantle Oval in that it sits in a World Heritage Site, and so
while this poses some challenges, it also provides a really unique opportunity. And getting the balance right is so important. The Conservation Management Plan describes the major historic, and this is quoted from the report, and historic and heritage characteristics of the oval, and provides guidance regarding on how these characteristics can be protected, conserved, and interpreted through any future planning and works. And it will continue to be an active document in any further planning and implementation as part of the oval's redevelopment. This is a key factor in this project and a good reason to support Councillor Archibald's amendment, which reinforces this aspect. So I think it's a really good amendment, and I'll be strongly supporting it.
Thank you, Councillor Kamada. On the amendment, it might be a question to the mover or the Director of Planning. Refer to the federal government for assessment. It's a very broad suggestion there. Is it specifically in relation to heritage that would be referring it to the federal government for assessment? Because I'd prefer some words that were more specific about a particular agency if we could come up with them.
Through the chair, it is about heritage. It's about being in the buffer zone and getting a heritage assessment completed. It was done by anything within that zone, including the police station, of course.
So the federal government department responsible for that would be?
I would need to check that if we wanted to put that in.
Through the chair, I believe it's the Department of the Environment, actually, in the current form.
DCEW something, yep. Perhaps we could just add the words for heritage assessment rather than it feels like a very broad statement. So I don't know if the mover is comfortable with adding the word for heritage assessment.
Certainly, we've actually got it for the state. Oh no, sorry, federal government for heritage assessment. Yes, so I think it's fine. Yes, thank you.
Yeah, it's obvious, but it's sort of also not. Yeah, exactly. All right, I'm comfortable to support this with that minor change to the wording. All right, so should we put this one to a vote? All those in favour of the amendment? And that's unanimous. So that brings us back to the item as amended, on which I believe we've had no speakers so far. So Councillor Sullivan.
Thank you. And just to be clear, anyone who is proposing a change to something that would have an impact on the World Heritage listed site is actually required to identify that potential to the federal government and its agencies. So I think that would just be a normal process anyway. That's my understanding of World Heritage listing implications. I want to start by just kind of like reminding us all, that this oval, this space has been a football place for 130 years. It is a very long period of community sporting involvement. And of course, before that, it had other heritage uses as well, including Indigenous. But the vast majority of the time from colonisation, it has been a place that the community fought for originally to get it from the state government and to get it for one of the very first football ovals in WA. And it's under threat. It's not under threat because of anything external. It's under threat just because it's past its use-by date. Its facilities no longer are adequate for what we want to use as a community, whether it be the local community or the state community. It's inadequate in terms of being able to use it for the functions that we want to see it being used for. It's also at a point in its life where if we don't fix it, we won't see the level of activity that it even currently has. We won't see women's football at the high level, at the AFLW level, played there into the future. And we will struggle, actually, to continue to see the oval utilised for WAFC. If we don't get a redevelopment of the oval, that threat of its demise is real. Um, and it, as a centre, as a place, as a city that prides itself in being the second city of Perth, if you like, or at least one of the most important centres outside of the CBD of Perth, it is imperative that we maintain the types of activities in the city centre that reflect and continue to support the centre's status. In other words, we start to lose those activities, we start to lose what Fremantle actually is. We lose the fact that we are a centre that is very important in a regional sense, and to be honest, important in a national sense as well. The master plan has been something that's been thought about, tried to be achieved over a number of iterations. And it comes about because people have sat down and said, what are the problems here? What are the issues that are causing this demise? What are the things that we're trying to fix? What are the opportunities for fixing them? How do we all collectively work together to actually make the future of this oval fantastic for another 130 years? And so this master plan is the culmination of looking at all of those elements, looking at all of those constraints, thinking about all of those opportunities, looking at all of the heritage implications, trying to work with all of the people, the stakeholders, if you like, that are within the precinct that are critical neighbours of the Oval, whether they be at the prison or the hospital or obviously the new neighbour, the WA Police and the like. So it's been a very, very extensive exercise with multiple different versions of plans that have come forward. And as someone that's been involved in that since day one, and in fact going back to before the AFL was even invented, the idea that we have finally managed to reach a position that actually looks achievable, that looks like it's exciting for both the federal and the state government and our own community, that hopefully can come to fruition, is kind of really exciting for me because it's been a long journey. There are issues. Well, I guess we have to understand what a master plan is. The master plan is essentially the culmination, the bringing together of all of those ideas into what we think is the best way of moving forward to achieve an oval redevelopment. And so it has a whole bunch of components that have been tested through all the different stakeholders in terms of will that work for each of them and will it actually create that mutually beneficial outcome that we're seeking. And to have all of the different major stakeholders who are in the working group and to have the precinct stakeholders who are not necessarily in the working group but have been also consulted, coming together and understanding that, yeah, this is the best option of all of the options that we've looked at going forward. So it does bring all of those ideas together, and it has been shown to be financially and functionally the most responsible approach to the redevelopment of this site. It's a master plan, though. At the end of the day, it is just the culmination of all of those ideas into a plan that gives you the best idea of how we're going to go about this. And it can be changed. There are things which aren't exactly as they will be when it's finally redeveloped. There's lots of elements to it, bits that might get a little bit bigger, bits that might actually disappear with further detailed assessment, bits that might get moved around because opportunities come forward as we go forward. But at the end of the day, the overall master plan will stand the test of time, I think. With regard to, I guess, the one bit that seems to be contentious, the identification of parcels that could be used for residential, I want to say two main things. One is that to make this work financially, to make it an economic opportunity going forward, it was imperative to actually identify ways in which the land could be used to help finance that redevelopment. And everyone in the process agreed that this is the way to do that, to achieve the football outcome, to achieve the community outcomes and the like. The idea originally of having residential in that area was confronting for me, as Councillor Kamada said. Most of us have seen Claremont. I had a very extensive review of Claremont. I was not impressed with the extent of residential, not because residential next to an oval is necessarily problematic, but because of how close it was to the oval and how it impacted on what the oval was there for, principally for the community, for sports, for those activities. And it was made really clear in my mind, and I think it's also been made really clear in the working group's mind and is reflected in the master plan, that those sorts of activities need to be secondary and complementary and need to work with the primary function of the oval, which is for sports and community activity, and to try and really open up that precinct to make it safe and the like. And that is what the master plan, I think, reflects. So I know there will be people in the community that are concerned that the residential packages are there. But the second thing I wanted to really emphasise in that regard is that southeast corner of the oval is probably the area where the greatest amount of variation and change is likely to occur in any case, because there is an opportunity to work more closely with the hospital, with the prisons and the like. There is so much scope for conversation in that area. I just fully believe that there will be iterations after this that will include lots of other things or mixtures of things that will come before us into the future. So I am comfortable that the idea of setting aside some parcels in the overall master plan to say these would be suitable for residential is an appropriate way to go. The last thing I want to say is that the residential that has been thought about and looked at is almost certainly not going to be high-end luxury apartments overlooking an oval. It is much more likely to be the sort of residential that fits within the context of a precinct that sits between an oval and a hospital. So the sorts of residential that you would be talking about could include, and we don't know what they will include, it's way too early to think about that, but could include student housing. It could include aged accommodation of different types. It could include accommodation that relates to either stays in the hospital or activities at the oval. It could include social housing, which we know is almost always difficult to locate in precincts, which is already heavily utilised for residential, particularly higher end residential. It could include key worker housing, which, given the relationship between the hospital and the police station and the need for key worker housing, would make it, again, a very suitable location for that sort of activity. So we are a long way from knowing what the end outcome will be. What we're doing is looking at a master plan that gives us an indication that this is the best opportunity to redevelop the oval in a way that gives it another, hopefully, 130 years of existence. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Sullivan. I might speak after you. And I think, thank you, Councillor Sullivan, for articulating the risk of not proceeding, which I think is very real and perhaps not recognised in the community, that this is a genuine risk, that if we aren't able to provide better sporting facilities at the Oval, we genuinely do risk losing the sporting content that we have there because it's just not up to scratch. Look, in a lot of ways, the master plan and the report speaks for itself, and so I won't speak for it. But I think the importance of sport, of community space, of green space. I think the lungs of our city and how we actually overall increase green space through that area is really important, and make it feel accessible by connecting it back to the city in ways that people feel invited into it. All these things are well spoken to in the master plan. I also want to speak about the housing aspect. I mean, I think the article in the West today was interesting. Some of the quotes in it: affordable housing should not be built in this precinct. It will devalue our properties. Probably don't reflect, I hope, the broader community sentiment in Fremantle. And I guess what I struggle with is people tell me, and I'm sure they tell elected members, they move to Freo because of the vibrancy, the culture, the energy, the diversity. And just please don't tell me that once they've secured their home in paradise, that they turn around and become the same people who want to deny the folks who gave us that vibrancy and diversity a place to live. Because it sort of feels like that sometimes could be true. And on that version of events, we risk becoming incredibly sanitised and anodyne. And I kind of have this nightmare vision of heritage Disneyland Fremantle, where it's all to look at and not to live in. And that's not what we love about our town. So this is an opportunity where we have some control. And I disagree with Councillor Sullivan on something, and that is that the delivery of the master plan is not predicated, unlike Claremont, and this is why we kept saying this is not Claremont. Unlike Claremont, their delivery is not predicated on funding from housing. It's this opportunity that we have to say, who is it who currently cannot live in Fremantle and needs some options? And that might be artists, designers, creators, thinkers, writers, people who work in our hospitality industries, those starting up innovative businesses, those learning and teaching and education institutions in Freo. All of these people are telling us that it is exceptionally hard for them to live in this town. So I think it's an opportunity we have. It doesn't rely entirely on the private market. It doesn't need to necessarily meet those same sort of funding criteria. And I think about a conversation I had on the weekend with a 20-year-old who works in Freo, still lives at home, and whose face just lit up with excitement when I said that there may be an opportunity to live in the heart of Fremantle's sporting and entertainment district, because she never thought that was going to be possible. So those are the people I think we're building it for. They might not be able to live here now, or they might be cramped up in the back of mum and dad's, but I think it's really important that we remember that with these opportunities don't come around a lot, where we actually have an opportunity ourselves as a council to influence that. It's been a really long road with the working group, and I think the testament to that is it's a master plan everyone in the working group agrees on. And that's not easy. I mean, I think you've seen other examples where it's been really tough for people to see the same picture, but I think working with the Fremantle Dockers, South Freo Footy Club, the Footy Commission, the elected members who've given a lot of time to that working group, it has been one of our most intense working groups, and the officers as well. Even the consultants, I feel, kind of went above and beyond. They certainly got a lot of input and feedback along the way. So the reference group, being able to work with the prison and the hospital, being able to extend the boundaries of this precinct in our consideration and think about how is it that we actually, help the prison achieve their master plan vision to have a better forecourt and better access. These are real things that have come out of this process. So it's going back out for public comment. I know every time a master plan goes out, people go straight to the detail or the pictures and say, oh, I don't like that colour, or that shouldn't look like that. It is a master plan. It will definitely change during delivery, and it'll go through a bunch of other approvals, but I hope our community can see the same picture that the working group were able to. Right, councillors. Oh, if we've got nothing further, I think I can put it to...
Do you want me to close?
Yeah. Councillor Kamada to close. I do.
Okay. So in closing, ultimately I think it's been made very clear it's an opportunity that would be a real shame to miss. I'm confident that we can get the balance right, and I'm genuinely excited by the prospect that this will finally come together after a long time with the support of all various stakeholders, and that it can deliver all the desirable outcomes that we're after, and that we can all be proud of it when it's finished. So thank you.
All right, so I'm going to put the officer's recommendation with both amendments incorporated in up for a vote. All those in favour? And that appears to be unanimous. Excellent. All right. We have, I believe, one more item on the agenda, which is the renewal of the Hungerford Prize sponsorship. So do I have a mover for this one? Councillor Archibald, seconded by Councillor Graham. Any discussion, debate? Did you wish to say something, Councillor Archibald?
Well, I think it'd be great to make a comment on this because the Hungerford Award has been a pretty amazing journey. It's really grown in the years that since it's been in place, and it has particularly grown since the partnership with the City of Fremantle. It's given it a much bigger prominence in the community, and to have that support has been a very substantial thing to that organisation. They are a small publishing house, and I can remember being involved with this group some years ago, and just how tough it was in the publishing industry to bring new authors, unknown authors, into the to be published and then to get them out into the world. And it is just such a significant thing that Fremantle Press has been able to sustain its way through, the whole internet world and all the other things that happened, e-publishing, big publishers taking over globally, all this sort of stuff, and has found a niche in this state and has continued to viably put new publishers out, new publications out into not only Australia but internationally. So I think I'm just so thrilled that this is coming back to us again, and I would wholeheartedly support the continued investment that we make in this particular group. Thank you.
Thank you. And noting the awards are coming up and at Fremantle Arts Centre, and everyone should come along. It's always very exciting. Okay, so I'll put this on to a vote. All those in favour? And that's unanimous. Thank you. So we don't have any previous motions of which previous notice has been given, urgent business, late items or confidential business. So I will close the meeting at 7:27. Thank you.